Okay, Philosophy of God, class number 2. Um, so, we're going to start today on these different attributes of God that can be known by human reason, according to Aquinas. Um, if you were to just sort of flip through the Summa Theologica, you would see the first question, again, is a kind of outline of sort of what theology is and how it works and what the Summa Theologica is going to be. The second question we went over last week, which is the existence of God. That question is broken down into those 3 articles, whether it is super obvious and self-evident that God exists. He answers no to that. Whether it can be proven at all, he answers yes to that. And then the third article is the proofs themselves. And that's question 2, which is really the first actual sort of theological question he asks, whether God exists. From question 3 to 13, Aquinas works through several attributes of God that in his teaching can be known by human reason alone. And if you look at them really closely, you're going to see that they derive from, or to a great degree, they derive from the 5 proofs for God's existence. So he's building the later questions on the Summa on the second question itself. So the second question is not just the first sort of logical one to ask, what does God exist? Okay, yeah, okay, now let's move on. It also becomes, those proofs themselves become the foundation for later arguments that are really important in the book. Another point to really pay attention to is that the third question on the simplicity of God, the first attribute that Aquinas deals with, that itself becomes the foundation for a lot that comes later. So God's simplicity is a really important attribute. In fact, that's why it comes right after God's existence. Question 3, right after God's existence, question 3 is on God's simplicity. After that, I'm just going to kind of read through them for you. Question 4 is on God's perfection. Question 5 is on goodness in general, sort of what does goodness mean. Then question 6 is on God's goodness. Okay, so we have simplicity, perfection, goodness, then God's infinity in question 7, then God existing in things, question 8, then the immutability of God, God not changing, in question 9, and then question 10, the eternity of God. Then finally in question 11, he finally asks the question, well, whether there's one God, the unity of God, and what that means. The God being one, has even the very meaning of one there is actually something sort of interesting. Then questions 12 and 13 have to do with the knowledge of God and the names of God. So question 12 is God's knowledge. Question 13, the names of God, and specifically, like, what does it mean when we speak of God in different ways? Okay. So that's just kind of an outline, and it's really interesting to see sort of the way he orders them. It's not just kind of a random, he didn't just like flip coins and say, I think I'm going to put the infinity of God at question 7. No, there's a sort of logical order to it. I'm not going to spend much time talking about why it's ordered in that particular way. That's actually a pretty good paper topic if you'd like to sort of write on that. It's not easy, but it might be a cool kind of fun paper topic for some of you to write. So today we're going to go over is very loosely speaking. I'm going to touch upon question 3 on the simplicity of God, a little bit about question 4. Actually, very little about question 4. I'm almost going to skip over that entirely. And then we're going to go over questions 6 and 8, again, very loosely. God's goodness and God sort of existing in things. I'm not going to at all talk about the infinity of God. I really have to be very selective. Either I'm very selective, or we just spend the rest of the quarter on these questions of the Summa, which I think would actually be fun to do one day. But I do think it's valuable to look at the non-theistic literature that's around. So that's just kind of the way we're going to do it. So I'm just going to do 4 questions today. What does it mean that God's essence and existence are identical? That's the final question in in the question on God's simplicity. And then what does it mean that we speak of God analogically? That's actually related to the very last question that's selected in this reader. So I'm kind of jump around on this question of analogy. So I'm going to jump sort of forward and back on that. And then, what is the connection between God's goodness and his efficient causality? That's a very kind of precise question that I want to ask. It's kind of really interesting insight that's worth making about what does it mean when we say that God is good. It's not just something you kind of like shout during youth groups. And then in the reader, I think this is the way it is. Moodle is down right now, so I don't have it in front of me. But in the reader, I have a question: how do we know that God is, quote, in all things? But I think I deleted that when I went onto Moodle. I would rather spend the time in what ways is God, quote, in all things, and what is the significance of each. And the reason I'm skipping this one, how do we know that God is in all things? It's actually, I think it's more interesting for us right now to think about what does it mean that God is the creator, and we're actually going to spend a full week on that in 2 weeks. So I'm just going to kind of delay that to that question. All right, so that's what we're going to go over today. So go to, in your reader, page 188, and I want to just like take a broad look at this question 3 on the simplicity of God. What does it mean that God is totally simple? So what might that even mean? Well, let's look at the way, the questions that he asks in order to even establish this attribute. Article 1, page 188, the question is whether God is a body. Okay. I'm going to sort of go really quickly over that. It's not something that we're going to focus on a lot in class, because I don't think a lot of you are, like they worship statues or the sun or something like that. So we're not going to spend a lot of time on that first question, but that's the first question within the question, whether God is a body. Then Article 2, page 191, whether God is composed of matter and form. So you remember that from philosophy of nature. Again, I'll kind of gloss over that pretty quickly. Then Article 3, whether God is the same as his essence or nature. Whether God is the same as his nature. And then finally Article 4, whether essence and existence are the same in God. And I'm going to stop there. I'm not going to go over whether God is contained in a genus, like whether God is a kind of thing, and whether there's any accidents in God. I'm going to sort of stop there and let the rest of it kind of, you can read it on your own, and then we'll go on to the next question after that. So, whether God is a body. Let's just start with that. Look real quick at the body of the article. He says you can show this in 3 ways: that God is non-bodily. He's not a thing that you can point to and say he's over there. He has a location. He has extension. God is this big, or he's this big, or something like that. I know that when we're little kids, we think God is like super large. He's like, he's even bigger than like my house, or he's even bigger than the whole earth, or something like that. I mean, he's not bigger than the earth because he doesn't have extension. So that's let's take a look at it. Now, first, I answer that it is absolutely true that God is not a body, and this can be shown in 3 ways. First, because no body is in motion unless it be put in motion, as is evident from induction. Now, this is really interesting. He takes this as a premise in the first way, that no body, well, it's not exactly the premise in the first way. The premise in the first way is, I'm back on page 185, whatever is in motion is put in motion by another. Whatever is moved by another. Here he says no body is in motion unless it be put in motion. He says this is evident from induction. He doesn't actually offer this long argument that he does there. I'm going to let you think about why that's slightly different, but that's okay. It has already been proved during the proofs that God is the first mover and is himself unmoved. Therefore, it is clear that God is not a body. So I'm not going to analyze that. We can sit and take a long time to analyze that, but I'm not going to spend the time to do that right now. I just want to point out something really interesting. This first argument that God is not a body is based on the first proof for God's existence. You see, it has already been proved that God is the first mover and he is unmoved. And if he's unmoved, that means he can't, and if he was a body, he couldn't be unmoved because he's causing motion, but nobody causes motion unless it is moved, but he is unmoved, therefore he's not a body. All right. Again, don't worry about the sort of intricacies of the argument. I just want to show you that if you accept the first proof for God's existence, this sort of follows directly from it. On the other hand, though it's built on it, it's not immediate. It is another article of the Summa. It is another question in the Summa. So it's distinct, though it's built on it. Okay. Second, because the first being must of necessity be an act and in no way in potentiality. Why? Well, in any single thing that passes from potentiality to actuality, the potentiality is prior in time to the actuality. Nevertheless, absolutely speaking, actuality is prior to potentiality. Don't worry about the prior in time. We're going to talk a lot more about what it means to be prior in time versus prior in nature in a couple weeks. I don't want to spend a lot of time on that today. But it has been proved already that God is the first being. What is that referring to? It could be the second way, that he's the first cause, or it could be the third way. The third way is it concludes that God is a necessary being, or he's sort of summarizing the first and second and third. I'm not sure exactly. Maybe even the fourth. I'm not sure. Anyway, again, he's sort of building this later one on an earlier proof. Look at the third one. God is the most noble of beings. Where do we get that? From the fourth proof. Okay. So, God is not a body. I think we can mostly take that for granted, but that, so I just want to kind of move on from there. Article 2, whether God is composed of matter and form. Again, go to the body of the article, page 191, towards the bottom. First, well, it's impossible that matter should exist in God. So that means God is pure form. Why? Well, matter is in potentiality, but we've already shown that God is pure act, where, without any potentiality, hence it is impossible that God should be composed of matter and form. Where have we shown that God is pure act? Well, the little editor, the editor here is pointing us to the proof for God's existence. Where exactly does he say that God is pure actuality? I actually don't think he says it explicitly in any of the proofs, unless I missed something. It's implicit in the first way, that he's first mover and unmoved. And it's also the second way, he's causing but not caused. But it's never explicitly said. So he's expecting us to sort of think about what he said and see what kind of follows from it. So if God is pure act without any potentiality, but matter is potentiality, and therefore he doesn't have any matter. Again, he's building on the first proof, or on the proof for God's existence. The second one is, the second reason to believe that, because everything is composed of matter and form, owes its perfection and goodness to its form, therefore its goodness is participated inasmuch as matter participates the form. That is a mouthful, and there's a lot of metaphysics behind that I do not feel like explaining. If you want, we can talk about it some more in class. But this whole doctrine of participation in Aquinas, we're actually going to we're going to be able to talk a lot better about it in a couple of weeks when we talk about the act of creation. In any case, the third argument, he's first efficient cause, is the basis for it. Again, he's building on the proofs that he established in the second question. Okay. I don't want to spend time on whether God is the same as his nature. Let's just jump to Article 4, which I think is the sort of really important one. Let me explain what this question means. Page 194, Article 4. Whether essence and existence are the same in God. I said this, I don't remember if I said this during lecture or during one of the Zoom meetings, but I said it last week, I'm going to repeat it now. Thomas Aquinas, one of his sort of big contributions to metaphysics and to philosophy in general is his distinction between essence and existence. Existence means the fact that something is, the fact that something exists. Okay, I'm kind of repeating myself, but that is what existence is. It is not the kind of thing that can be defined. So if you ask me what's the definition of existence, anybody who tries to answer that question doesn't understand the distinction. Why? Because when we ask for a definition, we are asking for an essence. So an essence is what something is. Existence is that something is. Okay. And in Thomas Aquinas, that's a real distinction. So in created beings, in all created beings, those two things, I don't want to say thing because it's not precise, but those two are distinct. There's a real distinction. What I am is one thing, and the fact that I am is another thing. Okay. And again, in the metaphysics class that I teach, that we spend an entire week talking about that, and that's something that you could spend a lot more time talking about. But there is some stuff in this reader about that, actually. If you're curious about that distinction, you can read about it starting page 129. Is a translation of Aquinas's little book called On Being and Essence. So if you think that's an interesting distinction, you can start. It starts on page 129. You can just go ahead and read it. In any case, in all created beings, what we are and the fact we are different, are distinct. In God, he's going to argue they are the same. Now, what would that mean? It would mean that what God is existence. Existence is the essence of God, is the nature of God. Okay. Now, if that seems, that's, you're going to like kind of zone out and just kind of like think about what that means. Go ahead, pause it and think about that. That is one of the things to pause and kind of zone out and just think about. In God, like God is existence. And okay, fine, cool. Go ahead and go to adoration and pray about that. Let's just jump into these arguments in favor of that. Because if he can show that, because that means God is not a body, which means he's not complex the way a body is. A body has all kinds of complexity to it. It has a location, it has a relation to all kinds of other things that it's, in terms of location. It can sort of rotate and has position, has all these different accidents. It could be colored. It could be a part of something else, or it could be composed of parts. Bodies have all kinds of complexity, extension and all that. Things that are made of matter and form have all kinds of complexity. Because if there's matter, that means there's potentiality. That means they could become something else. Well, that's all part of their description of what they are. They're all sort of belongs to their essence. If he shows that in God there are no distinctions whatsoever, that means there's no complexity whatsoever. If there's not even a distinction between his essence and his existence, that means that he is absolutely simple, because that's the most basic distinction of all, is the distinction between essence and existence. What something is and the fact that it is. That is the absolute most basic distinction in the real world. Okay. If those two things are not distinct in God, then God is absolutely simple. And he's done his job to show that God is absolutely simple. All right. Now, before we get into these arguments, I do want to say this argument, especially insofar as it's the foundation of a lot that comes in the future, in the following articles, is expressed in terms of Aristotelian physics, namely actuality and potentiality. That's Aristotle's distinction. If you don't buy that distinction, this is going to be a very difficult set of arguments for you. and it's going to be something that is going to be sort of hard for you to grasp and accept, and whatever, that's okay. You can go and, like I said, go and kind of figure this out on your own. And there is right now, I mean, as of the recording of this in 2022, and in the last couple of years, there's been a lot of debate among sort of natural theologians, people doing theology in this way. There's been some debate about God's simplicity. I haven't really found a lot of Catholics arguing against it. I think this is something that Catholics mostly accept. But there have been some Protestants sort of that are, well known in the sort of philosophical world that are not accepting God's simplicity for various reasons. If that's a thing you think is interesting, I can give you those sources. You can go and kind of dig those up and maybe write a paper on it if you like. That's fine. Okay. However, let's look at what Aquinas says. Let's start here. I answer that, page 195. God is not only his own essence, as is shown in the preceding article, but also his own existence. This may be shown in several ways. First, whatever a thing has besides its essence must be caused either by the constituent principles of that essence, like a property that necessarily accompanies the species, as the faculty of laughing is proper to man and is caused by the constituent principles of the species, or by some exterior agent, as heat is caused in water by fire. Okay, let me explain that. First argument, whatever a thing has other than what it is, other than its essence, is either caused by its essence, sort of something within it, or it's caused by something outside of it. So I mean, that's maybe an easier way to say it. Whatever you have that's other than what you are is either caused by something in you or something outside you. All right? So he says, well, the ability to laugh is something that's caused by something in us. It's sort of caused by our constituent principles. We can hear, and because of our rationality, we can notice something silly happening, and because of that, we're able to laugh. And maybe you also need a voice box to laugh. I don't know, whatever. Okay, so that's caused by things that are part of us. Okay, or if you have something, that is something else that's not caused by something within you, it's caused by something outside of you. Let's say you have a jacket that's caused by somebody making the jacket outside of you. Or here, heat is caused in water by fire. So if this water was boiling, well, it's not boiling because of what it is. It's not, part of water to boil. It's caused by, heat being, applied to this, and then it starts to boil, right? Those are the two possibilities. It's either what it is, or it's caused by what it is, something within it, or it's caused by something outside of it. So far, so good? All right. And that's essence. That's based on its essence. Therefore, if the existence of a thing is different from its essence, this existence must be caused either by some exterior agent or by its essential properties. Again, those are the two possibilities. If something exists, that existence, if it's not either, let's say it's three possibilities. If that thing exists, and that's something that is true to say of it, either that existence is its essence, or it comes from its essence, from within it, or it's caused by something external to it. Those are the three possibilities. But it's impossible for a thing's existence to be caused by its essential constituent principles. For nothing can be the sufficient cause of its own existence if its existence is caused. I think that's pretty logical. I don't really like the way the translation worded it, just because it sounds a little confusing. But, and I think maybe there's another metaphysical way to say it. A thing's essence can't cause its existence because everything in an essence that is causative, that is able to cause, must be actuated by existence. It has to actually be real if it's going to cause something. And if an essence isn't real, because we're assuming it's, it doesn't have its existence yet, well, that means it's not real. Well, if it's not real, that essence can't cause anything, especially its own existence. But there's also this problem of circularity of a thing can't cause itself. Okay. Again, I apologize. This is probably the hardest topic we're going to talk about in class, in this course. So if it's a little bit abstract, that's okay. Don't get frustrated. Therefore, that thing whose existence differs from its essence, must have its existence caused by another. So go back to our three possibilities. Either its existence is its essence, okay, they're the same, which is what's going to be the true for God eventually, or it's caused from the essence, it flows from the essence, but he says that's impossible, so he X's that off. So that means what are the two possibilities? Either existence is caused by something else, or existence and essence are the same for that being. But this cannot be true of God because we call God the first efficient cause. And if he's the first, that means he can't be caused by anything. So this one you have to X off for God too. So these are the two remaining possibilities. Either your existence is caused by something else outside of you, or your existence and your essence are the same. If your existence is caused by something outside of you, that means you're a creature. And God is not a creature, and that means you're not the first cause. So that one can be X'd off in regards to God. In regards to God, that means the only possibility that's left is his existence and his essence are identical. Not that existence comes from his essence, but they are the same. Okay. So this possibility that your existence comes from your essence is impossible for everybody. This possibility that your existence is caused by something outside of yourself, that means you're a creature. So everything other than God, its existence is caused by something else, which we call God. And that's going to be the topic for 2 weeks from now. Only God is identical to his essence. What he is and that he is are the same. All right? That's the first argument. And we can call this the argument from addition. If they're distinct, if essence and existence are distinct, that can only be because it is caused by something outside of itself. I'm going to call it addition. Maybe that's not the best way to say it. Okay. That was the first argument. There's two more. Secondly, existence is that which makes every form or nature actual. So remember what I just said, that if, think about like a unicorn or something that doesn't exist, okay? Does it have an essence? Kind of. We can sort of say, what is a unicorn? Well, it's a horse with a horn sticking out of its head. Okay, that's what it is. Does it have existence though? No, it doesn't have existence. So it has kind of an essence, insofar as we can describe what it is. It's not a real essence because it's not a real thing, but it does sort of have an essence. But it doesn't have existence. And because it doesn't have existence, it can't actually do anything in the real world. It might be able to, this sort of imaginative idea might be able to strike a child's imagination and make them wish that they had a unicorn. So I guess it kind of causes things in that way, but not really. Okay. Existence is that which makes every form or nature actual. For actual is sort of another word for real, but also able to act. That's kind of what actual means. For goodness and humanity are spoken of as actual only because they are spoken of as existing. So if they exist, then they're actual, they're real, and they can act. Okay. Therefore, existence must be compared to essence if the latter is a distinct reality as actuality to potentiality. So now I kind of want to draw something. Let's use this bookmark, I guess. So if we have actuality at the top and potentiality at the bottom, in between, remember we have matter close to potentiality. We have form closer to actuality. But then we also have essence, which is very much the same as form. But then we also have existence. Okay, now that I've drawn it, let me show it to you. So, there you go. So if this is the most actuality, as if it's not something we can sort of quantify, but let's just sort of go with it. There's a kind of sliding scale here. This is the most actuality, this is the most potentiality. Well, matter, especially prime matter, is all the way down here. Okay. Form is, compared to matter, form is more actual. And form sort of actualizes matter. Form is the same as essence, what something is, right? This is what something is. But essence isn't real unless it's actualized by existence. If it exists, then it's a real essence. So existence compared to essence has the same relationship as form compared to matter. Existence is the thing that actualizes essence, in a way sort of parallel to the way form actualizes matter. Okay? So this is the most actual thing, is existence. Because you can have an essence, like I said, a unicorn, that doesn't exist. You see that? Okay. Therefore, existence must be compared to essence if the latter is a distinct reality, as actuality to potentiality. But since in God there is no potentiality, as shown above, it says article 1, but it's also again in the proofs, it follows that in him essence does not differ from existence. So what's the second reason to posit that in God essence and existence are the same? Well, in God, well, if they were distinct, that would mean his essence and existence, if his essence and existence are distinct, that means that he would have something potential in him. He would have potentiality in him. Because essence compared to existence is potentiality compared to actuality. But in God, there's no potentiality. He cannot be anything other than he is. He has no potentiality at all. He's pure actuality, and that means he's pure existence. Okay, that's the second one. We can call it the argument from act. So the first one, the argument from addition. Second one, argument from act. Third one, because just as that which has fire, but is not itself fire, is on fire by participation. We're back to this participation thing. So that which has existence, but is not existence, is a being by participation. But God is his own essence, as shown above. We kind of skipped that, so sorry. If therefore he is not his own existence, as he will not be essential, but participated being, he will not be therefore the first being, which is absurd. Therefore God is his own existence and not merely his own essence. All right, this is the argument from participation. Let's go over it again. So imagine a piece of wood. This is what he's asking us to imagine. A piece of wood that's on fire. So it's on fire. The wood is on fire, but it's not fire. It's not fire, so it's participating in fire. Now, why am I pushing back to this fire thing? I'm not sure it's the best sort of analogy, because even when a piece of wood is on fire, the fire is a distinct thing. You can sort of point to there's the fire and there's the wood. So that's not the thing I want to stress right now. The thing I want to stress right now, which I actually think is really interesting, is that Aquinas compares existence in this metaphor. He compares existence to fire. I like that because that means in his imagination, existence is not just this kind of flat, stable thing. Existing for Aquinas is dynamic and warm and like energetic, the way fire is. That's what it is to exist for Aquinas. Whereas maybe somebody with a different imagination with it, well, oh yeah, I guess he exists, whatever. Like existence is just kind of this like flat, lame thing. No, existence in this metaphor is burning. That's kind of a beautiful image to me. That to exist is to burn the way fire is burning. Okay. Now, so let's go back to the actual sort of distinction within the metaphor. If the wood is on fire by participation because it's not fire, so now we go back to existence and essence. If a thing has existence but isn't existence, that means it has existence by participation. That means it's sharing its existence with something else. But that's absurd from God because, well, who's he going to share with? What's sort of above God? He wouldn't be first, and he wouldn't be the first cause. I think this goes back to the second proof of God's existence, because he's the first cause there. If he's the first cause, that means he doesn't participate in something else, because then that would be the first cause. You see that? So everything else participates in him in a way that we're going to talk about in a couple of weeks as creature to creator. But I mean, but that's it. So that sort of shows if he doesn't participate in existence, that means he is existence. And that's the third proof. So the first one is the argument from addition. The second one is the argument from actuality. The third one is the argument from participation. Okay. Oh, that's a mouthful. That took a long time too. All right. What does it mean that we speak of God analogically? What is this contrasted with? So, go to page 207. This is related to whether God is perfect. I'm not going to go through all those arguments. I'm skipping a lot, as you can tell. But the main discussions on analogy are on Article 2 of question, I guess this is question 4, yeah. Of question 4, page 207. And Article 3, whether any creature can be like God, it starts on page 209. Okay. But the doctrine of analogy is actually extremely important. It is very, very intimately related to this thing I've called negative theology last week. And it has to do with the way we speak of God and the content of those propositions that we say about God. So, let's just jump to page 209. I want to kind of get straight to that point. Whether any creature can be like God. And so I'm on page 209. And he affirms, on the contrary, well, it's written, let us make man to our image and likeness, and when he appear, he shall be like to him. All right. So you can sort of guess he's probably going to say, well, yeah, in a way, creatures can be like God, but it's going to be really, really qualified. Almost to the point of answering no. Actually, that's sort of where we're going to go to, but let's see how he qualifies it. I answer that. Since likeness is based on agreement or communication in form, how is one thing like another? How are you and I alike? Well, we have some similarities in our form. We have 2 ears, 2 eyes, whatever. Okay, we're like each other in that way. So likeness it's based on agreement of form. It varies according to the many modes of communication and form. Mode is way. So what are the different ways that you can share a form? Some things are said to be like, which communicate in the same form according to the same formality and according to the same mode. And these are said to be not merely like, but equal in their likeness. As 2 things equally white are said to be alike in whiteness. And this is the most perfect likeness. So what's formal sameness? How are 2 things just exactly alike? Well, if they're exactly alike in the same way. So this piece of paper is white, and this piece of paper is white, and they're white in the same way, and it's the same thing that they're alike as. I mean, my lighting is a little off, but they're both white in the same way, okay? And they're both equally white. Whereas, I probably have a piece of paper that's less white. The paper actually of this Hume book is a little bit off-white, so they're not equally white. But it's the same modality because we're both talking about color here, okay? So that's the one, they're just the same. They're just alike in the same way. In another way, we speak of things as alike, which communicate in form according to the same formality, though not according to the same measure, but according to more or less. As something less white is said to be like another thing more white, and this is an imperfect likeness, what I just said. So this is the first formally the same and equal. So they're both white, and they're both equally white. Whereas these 2 shades, they're both formally white, but this one is more white than this one. Okay? That's imperfect likeness. In a third way, some things are said to be alike which communicate in the same form, but not according to the same formality, as we see in non-univocal agents. For since every agent reproduces itself insofar as it is an agent, and everything acts according to the manner of its form, the effect must in some way resemble the form of the agent. If therefore the agent is contained in the same species as its effect, there will be a likeness in form between that which makes and that which is made, according to the same formality of the species, as a man reproduces man. Okay. If, however, the agent and its effects are not contained in the same species, they will be like in the sun according to the formula. Okay, so let me distinguish this third one. Non-univocal agents. This is where we're going to get an analogy introduced. And actually, let me just go back to my questions. What does it mean that we speak of God analogically? What is this contrasted with? It's contrasted first with univocal. You remember in logic we made this distinction already. What does analogous mean? Well, it's different from univocal. So univocal words, Father Andy is a human being and you are a human being. That's univocal. The word human being is said in the same way of me and of you. That's univocal, said in the same way. Equivocation means the word is said in different ways. Okay. So the example I used in logic is, well, the dog is barking and then there's the bark of the tree. The word bark is univocal there. Equivocal. It means totally different things there. Okay. Analogical is something else, is a third way to speak of speaking. Okay. And this first one where he's like, well, the way man generates man, okay, that's not the distinction yet. Let's look at the distinction here. If, however, the agent and its effect are not contained in the same species, there will be a likeness, but not according to the formality of the same species, as things generated by the sun's heat may be in some sort spoken of as like the sun, not as though they received the form of the sun in its specific likeness, but in its generic likeness. Okay, that's the main distinction that he's trying to make here. Okay. In what way are two things alike that are different species, but they have a relationship of causality? So, for example, this pen, I'm causing it to go up in the air. Okay, I am causing it. In some sense, I am acting as cause to this pen. In what way am I causing it? Well, it's sharing in the upward motion of my hand that was there for a second. Okay, and therefore I'm causing what? I'm not causing it to be a pen. So it's not exactly what Aquinas is talking about. I'm causing it to move. In what way? Well, I'm sort of causing it to participate in the motion of my hand. There, okay, the motion is the same here. Trying to think of because his example isn't great because it's not true. He thought if you just left a steak out in the sunlight, maggots just came out of it. Like the sun just sort of caused the maggots to exist. Whereas, I don't know, apparently nobody noticed that a fly came and laid eggs there. So in his understanding of, which is kind of primitive, of where maggots came out of, this is the thing generated by the sun's heat. So he thinks the sun is just causing those maggots to exist in the steak that you left out. And they're sort of like the sun. This is actually kind of a funny analogy. He's saying in the way that those maggots are like the sun because they're caused by it, that's the way we are to God. God is like the sun and we're the maggots. And just like maggots are like the sun, in this third way you can be like something because you're the effect of it as cause, that's the way we are like God. We're like God in the way that maggots are like the sun, which I really like. It's very humbling to kind of think about it that way. Now, if there's some agent not contained in any genus, which God is not any kind of thing, its effect will still more distantly reproduce the form of agent. So we're actually even farther than maggots and the sun. It's even more distant than that. Not that is so as to participate in the likeness of the agent's form according to the same specific or generic formality, but only according to some sort of analogy. Now we have the introduction of the word analogy, as existence is common to all. In this way, all created things, insofar as they are beings, are like God as the first and universal principle of all being. Okay, that's what it means to speak by analogy. Now, that's how distant it is. Our being, everything that we are, compared to God, is like farther than the comparison between maggots and the sun. However, there is still a connection. We are still like him. because we exist and he exists. However, the way we exist, this is the stuff that's going to come later on, what it means for us to exist and what it means for God to exist, there's no proportion. It's not that God exists, like, let's say our existence is one, if we're going to quantify this in our imagination. Our existence is one. It's not that God is 10 billion or much less 1,000. He's not 10 million or billion or trillion or whatever number you want. There's no number. There's no proportion between our existence and God's. And yet, it is existence. And what is it that ties it together? Not some proportionality. What is it that ties us to God? The fact that he created us. And that act of creation, that is the foundation for, first of all, it's the foundation for our existence, but it's the foundation for any resemblance that we might have to God. His act of creation. Not any proportion, because it's infinitely distant. Okay. So that's what it means to speak of analogy. And because of that, everything that we speak, because our language is founded on the senses, which gain information from created things, which are also infinitely removed by God, and only participate in his being by, are participating by in his being, and are only the same according to analogy. All of our words fall short of God in the same way, because our words are based on creatures that are only similar by analogy. That means everything we say about God is true according to this mode of analogy. Nothing we say of God is univocally true. When we say God is good, what we mean by good, what do we mean by good? Well, it's a good pizza. You're a good person. God is good. He's not good the way the pizza is good, but he's also not good the way you're good. He's good in his own way, which is in some way infinitely removed. And yet, it's still similar because he's the creator of us. When we say he's good, when we say he's one, when we say he is wise or just or whatever, every single word we could ever say about God never is univocal, because all our words are based on creatures. Okay. That's what the analogy means. Now, if our words fall short and our knowledge is related to our words, that means all of our knowledge of God is analogous. It sort of falls into this modality. And if that's the case, what could we know directly, univocally, by God, about God? Only what he is not what he is. You guys see how all that follows? If not, rewind it and replay it, because I don't want to say it again. All right. Told you this is tough material. That is number 6. Okay, number 7. What is the connection between God's goodness and his efficient causality? Go to page 212. This one I hope is going to be short and sweet. Yeah, let's just go to page 212. Look at the body. Whether God is good. I actually skipped the entire question. What is goodness? Page 212. I answer that. To be good belongs preeminently to God. Okay, so he's asking whether God is good. Well, yeah, he's really good. He's the best. Okay. Why? A thing is good according to its desirableness. That's the way he defines good. Isn't that interesting? It's not this external metaphysical thing that he just has good. No. What does it mean that something is good? It means that it's desired by some will. If it's desirable, that's what it means that it's good. So goodness actually is a sort of relative term. Something is good relative to some other. Well, it doesn't have to be an other being, because God is also good in reference to himself, but a thing is good according to its desirableness. I just want to explain that for a second. So a good amount of food for me and for maybe some of you who are like super small is not going to be the same. A good amount of food for you, a desirable amount which would keep you healthy, would not be the same as a good amount for me. Okay. And a lot of ethics, The science of ethics is based on this sort of relationality of a lot of sort of what's best for different people. Is there a best? Yeah, there is a best way for me to eat. Maybe not really precise. It might not be like this particular type of food, but there's a pretty good, like, pretty precise range of calories that I should be eating for me to not be like gaining weight, but also not to be like super skinny. There's a range that's you can kind of calculate pretty well based on my weight and my whatever muscularity or whatever. Okay. So there's that good that's sort of relative, and that means that's what's desirable is what's good. What's desirable for me is to stay alive, is to not, get diabetes or something like that. Okay. So that's kind of the next sentence. A thing is good according to its desirableness. Everything seeks after its own perfection. So what's good for me to be perfected? That is what's best for me. And the perfection and form of an effect consists in a certain likeness to the agent, since every agent makes its like, and hence the agent itself is desirable and has the nature of a good. This is really, really interesting. Why is God good? Because he's our cause, and it's good for every effect to be like its cause. What is good for an affected thing, for an effect? Its perfection, for it to be what it's supposed to be, best is for it to resemble its cause as much as possible. This is such a, like, in Aquinas' mind, this is such a universal principle that it would even mean the pen, what's the perfection of the pen insofar as it's, a projectile being thrown by my hand? Well, its perfection consists in imitating or resembling the motion of my hand that threw it. It goes down to that sort of low level. Again, it's not like this pen is all happy that it's, I'm so happy that I'm able to, no. But that's sort of what perfection means, even on that very low level. But when it comes to more sort of sophisticated beings, all the more so, it consists in a certain likeness to the agent. That's why God is good. He's good because he's good for us, because he's our cause and we are his effects. For the very thing which is desirable in it is the participation of its likeness. Therefore, since God is the first effective cause of all things, it is manifest that the aspect of good and desirableness belong to him. And so Dionysius attributes good to God as the first efficient cause, saying that God is called good as by whom all things subsist. How is God good? He's good as the first efficient cause. Why? Because his effects find their perfection in him as their cause. That's why God is good. So God's goodness is relative to us because he is our cause. It's something, again, not relative in the sense of changeable or like not real or something. That's kind of the way we say relative. No, it's relative because it's based on this relationship of cause and effect. And that's what makes it meaningful to say that God is good. All right? That's all I want to say about that. Okay, in what ways is God in all things? What is the significance of each? Go to page 233. Skipping a ton. But that's okay. The question here, whether God is everywhere by essence, presence, and power. Those are the three ways, right? There's three ways in which God is in all things. What does each one mean? I don't want to go through these proofs. I just want to tell you each one. You can go through this on your own because I'm like almost hitting an hour right now. All right. So he says, well, God is in things in all these different ways. He's in things. He's in human beings, like, who have been baptized and who accept him by grace. He's going to put grace aside right now. He's in the saints by grace. But how he's in other things created by him, page 233. How is God in creatures? Maybe considered from human affairs. And he's going to compare God to a king. A king, for example, is said to be in the whole kingdom by his power. So these are the three ways. He's in everything by his power, by his presence, and by his essence. And what is the meaning of each three? Let's work through it. God is everywhere by his power. By the way, why is this even an important question? Well, because God can't be everywhere by location. You can't point and say God is here and he's located here, because that means he's not anywhere else. And that would mean that God is a body, which we already disproved a long time ago. We, meaning Aquinas, disproved a long time ago. Okay. So he is present, not as a located body with extension, like this thing is present here. He's present by his power, by his presence, and by his essence. Let's take a look. What does it mean that he's everywhere by his power? A king is said to be in the whole kingdom by his power, although he's not everywhere present. Again, a thing is said to be by its presence and other things, which are subject to its inspection, and things in a house are said to be present to anyone who may not be a substance in every part of the house. Lastly, a thing is said to be by way of substance or essence in that place in which its substance may be. Okay, let's start with the first one. There were some, so each of these three is going to be important because there's going to be a heresy that they correct. There were some, namely the Manichees, who said that spiritual and incorporeal things were subject to the divine power, but that visible and corporeal things were subject to the power of a contrary principle. So the Manichees believed that there was a good God, but there was also an evil God, and that the good God was in charge of spiritual things, and that the evil God was in charge of bodies. Contrary to these, it is necessary to say that God is in all things by his power. So what does it mean that God is in all things by his power? That means he is in control of all things, both spiritual and physical. That's what it means that God is there by his power. Control of all things. But others, though they believed that all things were subject to the divine power, still did not allow that divine providence extended to these inferior bodies. And in the person of these, it is said, he works about the poles of the heavens, he does not consider our things. Against these, it is necessary to say that God is in all things by his presence. I think this is what we might call, this is one aspect of some Neoplatonism that say that the one, which is their name for God, he's immediately concerned with, or he kind of flows into being, which flows into soul and all of these sort of upper things. And then at the very sort of bottom of this flowing from the one, there are these inferior bodies, like our bodies, or like stuff on this earth. And actually I think maybe Aristotle's God might be sort of in this category, because Aristotle's God only thinks about himself. He's not concerned with sort of the things that are in motion, especially sort of on earth. And Aquinas says, well, no, it's not that God is like not concerned with these things. No, he's present even to these minor, like sort of simple bodies on this earth, inferior bodies. So against these, it is necessary to say that God is in all things by his presence. So he's not just powerful over them, but like in a very distant way, he's present to all of them. So God is in all things by his power, because there's no other God that's in charge of other stuff. He is in all things by his presence, because he cares and he has sort of has providence even over inferior bodies. Okay. And third, others said that although all things are subject to God's providence, still all things are not immediately created by God, but that he immediately created the first creatures, and these created the others. And this is a third heresy that Aquinas says, well, it's that God created like some angels. I think there were some Islamic philosophers that said this, that God created like the greatest angels, and that those angels then created lesser angels, and that those lesser angels then created like the human soul and maybe the body, and that there's like really low angels created the created world. And that's again a way to sort of separate God from the physical world, because to so many philosophies the physical world just kind of sucks and they don't want God to be near it. For Aquinas, no, God creates everything immediately without the instrumentality of any angel or anything else. And so against these, it is necessary that he is in all things by his essence. So what does it mean that God is in all things by his essence? That he creates every single thing immediately. Immediately doesn't mean right away. It means without mediation, directly. Okay. So God is in all things by his power, because he has power over all of them. There's no other God that has power over bodies. He's in all things by his presence, because he has providence over all of them. There's nothing that's sort of outside of his control and concern. And he's in all things by his essence, because he creates all things directly and without mediation. Okay. That's what do those three things mean. In what ways is God in all things? Those three ways. What is the significance of each? Because each one has a heresy. Manichaeism, Neoplatonism, and certain philosophies that said that there were like other creatures that also created other creatures. There were angels that created other creatures. So those are the three sort of heresies that it's answering. Okay? I'm exhausted, but I think that's it for today. So I will see you, figure out what you want to talk about, because there's a lot here. If you'd like to talk about any of the stuff that I skipped, feel free. Please ask, and we'll go through those articles. Or if you want to go in more depth on this stuff, it's on you. Whatever you guys want to talk about, I'll be there.